What's up, guys? It's Ben with 2020 election predictions, and in today's video, I'm going to look at Biden's best case scenario. In my previous video, which I will link in the description later, I said that Biden could win a lot more electoral votes than I think he can win now. This was back, I think, in June when Biden was really surging. He was ahead in the betting odds, he was ahead in all the polls, and there was discussion about how Biden could take Texas. There was polls that had Biden up 2-3 points. Ohio was talking about, it, and it was expected to be a landslide. I think right now the betting odds are completely even. In fact, on one betting odds site, it had President Trump ahead of Biden, so Biden is the favorite on this betting site. But I still think that Biden has a lot of potential to do well. So in today's video, I'm going to look at what Biden's best case scenario will be. So without further ado, let me get started. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I would encourage you to do that right now. I'm going to make a video every single day until the election. Sometimes 2 videos, and I'm going to go live some. So let's just get started. Right now, this is where I see everything. And in fact, I think that New Mexico could be safe in Biden's best case scenario. And I think that these are all going to trend leftward in Biden's best case scenario. And just a quick word, I think these states will be safe, but I think in Biden's best case scenario, these states could be within 12 points. I still think Trump would win them, but Utah, Kansas, Missouri, Indiana, and Mississippi. So let's just start going leftward to rightward where I think the race could be. So starting out with the likely Democratic states, I think that New Hampshire could very well be a likely Democratic state. In 2016, it was one of the closest states in terms of raw voting numbers, but there was one poll that had Trump's approval in the state of New Hampshire as -25. And even when the coronavirus hit and Trump's response to it, I think that Trump has taken a hit in the polls. In my real projections, I classified New Hampshire as a lean Democrat, but I could definitely see in Biden's best case scenario if he opens up a lead and makes a greater polling lead, that he could extend it and make it a likely Democratic state. And just to preface this, the tilt characterization is 2% or under, lean is 2 to 5%, likely is 5 to 12%, and safe is 12% or more. Next up is the state of Minnesota. These are both states that Hillary Clinton won in 2016. And while I think Minnesota is probably going to be a lean Democratic state or tilt Democratic state at this point, the polls have demonstrated that Trump is kind of surging in that state. I think very well that Minnesota could remain in the Democratic column and that Biden could improve upon Hillary Clinton's performance there when she only won it by 1.5 percentage points. So I could very well see, especially with all the energy after George Floyd's death, maybe there's a lot of energy there to vote for Biden. But I very well think that also could backfire with kind of all the riots in Minneapolis that could help Trump. But right now I'm doing Biden's best case scenario. Lastly, in the state of Michigan, even though Trump won this state in 2016, I think that Biden's best chance of flipping a state that Donald Trump won is in the state of Michigan. I've said this in the past that I was really shocked when Donald Trump won Michigan, especially in comparison to Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. I was surprised that he won this one, but Michigan, I think it's very hard for a Republican to win statewide. So I think it will be very hard for Trump to do that again. Right now, I have Michigan as a lean Democratic state, but if Joe Biden performs very well and can get a lot of get out the vote in kind of the urban areas like Detroit or Flint, I could see this Biden having a 5% lead. So next up, going to the lean Republican states. I know that I said I was going to go to the left to the right, but I kind of want to focus on the lean Republican states. Even though Donald Trump won Alaska by a huge margin in 2016, Alaska can kind of be weird because no one really focuses on it. It's typically kind of a libertarian state. And I don't think Biden's kind of anti-fossil fuels message would resonate that well. But we've seen polls that have the Senate race pretty close, and it's very hard to pull Alaska. But I mean, in some polls, Trump's only up by like 2 to 4 points. I think Trump's going to win the state pretty handily, but it could be a lot closer than anyone predicts. And I doubt anyone's really going to care about it because we might know who's the winner of the election before the results even come in. Similar to Alaska, Montana, it has a Democratic senator. It has a very competitive Senate race in 2020, and they currently have a Democratic governor. So Montana definitely has some independent streaks. I do expect Donald Trump to win it again. I mean, he won it by 20 points in 2016. I think it'll probably be less just because there's a competitive governor and Senate race. But it could even go into the lean Republican category if Biden just does very well. And lastly is the state of South Carolina. There's a lot of Democratic energy, a very competitive Senate race. I mean, I think I saw a poll that had Donald Trump +9. I think he's going to win it by even a little bit more than that. But I mean, if Joe Biden has a huge spurt of momentum, I could see Biden potentially doing a lean Republican state. And before I get too far into this video, before people kind of go to the comments and be like, "Oh, this is blasphemy," like this is literally Biden's best case scenario. Like this is if like just Trump completely flounders. I mean, Biden just crushes him in the debates. Like I don't think this outcome is necessarily very realistic, but I think this is like Biden's cap. Like even if Trump were to like have a stroke or something, I still think Trump's going to win all these states in red. So that's kind of how I want to preface this right now. Okay, so moving on to the lean Democratic states, I want to start out with Arizona. Arizona, I think, out of kind of all these states, is going to be the state that is going to trend leftward the most. Donald Trump won it by 3.5 points in 2016. But I mean, in 2018, we saw a 6-point swing. I don't think it's going to swing that much more. And I think it could swing back a little bit towards Trump just because I don't think Martha McSally was a very good Senate candidate for the Republicans. But I mean, we've seen polls. I think the average of poll has Biden up by like 2.5. So, I mean, Biden really could win it by like 2, 3, 4 points in his best case scenario. I want to emphasize that a lot. Next up is the state of Wisconsin. I definitely think that Biden could open up a lead in Wisconsin. I think the average of polls have it at like Biden like +5 or 6. But I think the recent events that happened in there, like in some of the burning and the looting, I don't have Wisconsin as a likely characterization in his best case scenario. And I think it's going to be a lot closer. So even in Biden's best case scenario, I don't think he's going to win it by 5+ points. I think it's probably going to be around 4 or 5 points. But I mean, obviously, in my realistic scenario, I think it's going to be a lot closer. So right now, we're seeing that Biden's at 269, so he's almost there. Next up is Pennsylvania. For similar reasons, I think like Pennsylvania and Biden's best case scenario is between lean and likely. In fact, right now, I think I might have it as a likely state just because like Biden has spent a lot of time in Pennsylvania and with Delaware, it's kind of like his home state. He spent a lot of time in Scranton. But like right now, I think Wisconsin and Pennsylvania are very close in terms of like in Biden's best case scenario between like that 4, 5, 6% margin. Lastly is the state of Florida. I think this very well could move to the tilt Democratic thing, but like right now, Biden's holding a pretty steady lead in the polls by I think about 4 points right now. But we saw in 2018 that these polls were very, very skewed towards the Democrats. Ron DeSantis outperformed the polls by like 3.5 points. So if you're taking that bias in right now, then Trump would lose the state by 0.5 point. But I mean, I think Biden, if he kind of keeps on hammering in the message, and if the coronavirus gets worse, I think that's one scenario that could help Biden out a lot. It could be his best case scenario if the coronavirus gets a lot worse. That we could see Biden doing a lot better. All right, next up, moving to the tilt Democratic states. I think Georgia, I think he could flip Georgia, which I think could surprise a lot of people. I think that he could get a lot of the voters who voted for him in the primary. He put him over the top. If we remember that in South Carolina was kind of the turning point state in the Democratic primary, a lot of black voters came out to vote for him, and Georgia has a high black population. And we saw in 2018 that Georgia can be winnable for the Democrats, even though that Stacey Abrams didn't win. I mean, in that 2 year period, it's probably going to trend a little bit more leftward. I think Biden is probably a more palatable candidate statewide than Stacey Abrams, especially in a very traditionally conservative state. I think Biden can position himself as more of a moderate than like Stacey Abrams could. Um, Next up is the state of North Carolina. I think that North Carolina, Biden definitely could win. Trump is up in the polls right now in Georgia and North Carolina. I think I saw a Trump +7 poll in North Carolina, like Trump +2 or +3. But in his best case scenario, I could see Biden winning this state, and especially like Roy Cooper on the governor's ballot, like helping him out there too. And I haven't done it yet, but I think that uh, Biden could win back Maine's second congressional district, even though Hillary Clinton lost it. And same with Nebraska. I think this could even be a lean Democratic territory if Trump won. All right. Lastly, I'm going to go to the total Republican state. So I think that there's been a lot of talk about Texas going blue. I even think in Biden's best case scenario that he's not going to win Texas. Texas has a large population like California and Florida. So when you see a poll like that just came out that has Trump +7, it's going to be very, very hard for Biden to kind of overcome something like that. We did see some polls earlier, like in late June, early July, that had this race as tied. But I think some of the recent event that Trump has experienced a boost. So I even think if we kind of go back to where Trump was in late June, early July, which I think would have been Biden's best case scenario if we kind of went back in time to that, I still think that Trump wins Texas. I don't think there's any scenario where Biden can win Texas. 2024 is a completely different story because I think Texas demographics will have changed so much. All right, before I get to the last two states, I want to remind you all to please subscribe if you haven't already. That really helps me out, and you'll get all the notifications if you hit the bell notification next to it when I go live, when I do when new videos come out. All right, so lastly is the state of Iowa. I think Iowa's a little bit to the right of Ohio, but I would still have it as the tilt characterization. The Senate race could make it more competitive, and same with Ohio. So right now you can see we have Biden at 351 and Trump at 187. And one like data point I want to look at that I think is pretty interesting is that still in Biden's best case scenario, he doesn't get close to um, uh, Obama's 2008 landslide victory. I think this would kind of borderline be called a landslide victory, but I think this is pretty unlikely at this point. I think Trump is going to win in states like North Carolina and Georgia, and states like Arizona, Wisconsin, Florida, and Pennsylvania are going to be very competitive, maybe even Minnesota as well. But one thing I think that's pretty interesting is President Obama won the popular vote by around like 6 percentage points, I think, right there, or actually 7. I think if Biden wins by 7 percentage points, the electoral college is going to be a lot closer. I mean, I think this scenario happens if Biden wins the popular vote by about 8 or 9 points, which I think is kind of where it's going to be capped at, especially when we're more polarized and there's more partisans. And what I think is very interesting about this is how just Trump has completely transformed the electoral map. So, I mean, like Iowa and Ohio have traditionally been swing states. So, I mean, it's kind of crazy to think that like Trump in his worst case scenario would still win these states, but I stand by that very much. But we do see some traditionally Republican states going blue in Biden's best case scenario, like Georgia, Arizona, and even North Carolina, even though that Obama won that in 2008. So I think that if Biden were to win the popular vote by 7 points, I still think that Trump would probably win Georgia and he would win North Carolina. So I think that a lot of things that have changed like that. one thing I think is pretty ironic is even like in this 12-point period when a lot of things have changed and people kind of have always expected that the electoral map would trend in the Democrats' favor just because as the map gets more diverse, we get more immigration. It's kind of been kind of the theory among political science, which I do agree with to a certain extent. But I mean, Trump has just completely upended everything. And I mean, Trump lost the popular vote in 2016, but he won states like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania that I mean President Bush didn't even win in his victories in 2000 and in 2004, which I think is just crazy and just kind of talks about how politics are continually evolving and changing. So I really hope that y'all like this video. I know it ran a little bit long, but I think y'all are really gonna like this video. So thanks, guys.